Thanks for tuning in to Don't Get Left Out in the Cold. I've got Chris with me today from TM. Thanks very much, Chris, for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you as always.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Mick.
So I want to talk to you about a few things. I've got a few things in mind that I want to go through. So basically what we're going to be talking today about is Chris's journey from when he left school, when he went possibly to university. I'm pretty sure you did go to uni, didn't you?
Mm-hmm, I did.
Like us tradesmen, but yeah, similar. How we met Joe, just basically how he came from A to B to C, and you're probably on about Z now, aren't you, with the amount of things that you've done?
I think I've got a bit more to go. Hopefully I'm only on about C. But
right, okay, fair enough.
Let's
Cut
see
me
what
dead there, didn't it?
Let's see what the future has to hold.
Yeah, so basically, just tell me a little bit about, when you left school, what your thoughts of what you wanted to be, what your ambitions were.
So school was a good time for me. I always say that unfortunately I don't have the sexy backstory, the rags to riches type rise to and into business and becoming an entrepreneur. I never really fell into entrepreneurship. I did it intentionally. I always knew I wanted to be a businessman, and that probably came from the fact that both my parents were small business owners when I was a youngster. So I looked up to my mum, looked up to my dad. They were both successful small business people, and I kind of got that bug, I think, from them to be my own boss, run my own thing, and I always knew that at school. So I didn't go to a particularly good school. I went to a school, it was at the time called Orton Longville Secondary School, and it was, it did the job. There was a good network of people there, relatively good teachers. Nothing special, but I always had in the back of my mind that I didn't really need what it was that I was being taught, because I had the intention of starting my own business as soon as I'd left. I already knew, yeah. I've identified as a business owner or a businessman, I should say, since I was about 12 years old. I always knew that I was going to run a business. So, going back to the point where it was always very intentional on my part to become a business person. I didn't see myself as anything else. So school was a fun time for me, a strange time in the sense that, as I said, I always felt like it came relatively easy to me. I was somebody that did quite well at school.
Did you achieve well? You already answered the question. Did you get good grades and well at school?
Pretty much. I tested well. I was always bad at coursework because I would typically procrastinate quite a lot. That's, I would say, one of my major weaknesses, something that I tend to put things off, and I've learned how to handle that over a period of time. So coursework, it never really motivated me. I didn't want to do it. Always kind of got bad grades from a coursework perspective. Not that I couldn't do it, just that I didn't do it for the most part. But in an exam situation, I would always ace it. So I did well from a school perspective.
Do you reckon you worked better under pressure maybe a little bit then rather than just left to your own devices?
I was always confident in myself, so I never felt pressure, actually, funnily enough, in an exam situation. I remember being, at school, and I've tested a lot, through my studies, because obviously I went on to university after graduating from secondary school, but
I'm guessing you did business at
I did, and it was not at university, actually, elements of business at university. At secondary school, I took on business studies, which is one of the famed subjects at GCSE level, and that was actually very good, really helpful.
Great. Unfortunately, me, when I was at school, I didn't really pay attention. You probably know that anyway. Pay attention. I always knew I was going to be a businessman, to be fair. I wouldn't say a businessman like you knew, mainly like a plumber, kind of, with my own business, which I ended up having, but slightly different. But your vision was probably a little more clearer than mine. Mine was a little bit all over the show. So we can speed up a little bit, because you've said to me about university. So when you've left university, what was your first actual, would we say, job, or did you even have a job, or did you go straight on your own?
So I did have a job. So what I studied was actually construction and property management at university. And in my mind, you say my vision was clear, it actually wasn't. I knew I wanted to be a business person, and back around that time, even probably now, even still, it was, property was hailed as the big thing to get into, to make money, of which I always have had an interest in. And so I decided to go down the construction management and property management type route in university. Again, did relatively well and graduated from that. But it was more designed in reality, looking back and reflecting on it, it was more designed for less entrepreneurial people, more QS dedicated type employment positions, like vocational positions in that industry, of which I was completely uninterested in truth. And again, this is, bearing in mind, back then I was, inexperienced, didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do, apart from wanting to be a business person, had an element of interest in property, and graduated from university at a time where actually the entire construction industry was on its knees because of
because we had the recession.
The recession, and at the time, if you remember
2008 roughly. That
2008 it was, and it was the credit crunch back then. Now it's the cost of living crisis. Back then, the brand was the credit crunch.
Yeah,
I remember it clearly. So no one was employing. Not that I particularly wanted to get into that career anyway, because I'm glad that happened to me back then, because I would have seen, ultimately, I think what would have happened to me, I would have done relatively well and probably grown up a corporate ladder, which is just not me or who I am. So
interesting that, because what I'm seeing around me and what you're creating is corporate.
Well, it's
not quite. You kind of, in my opinion, knowing the growth of your company, how you've done it, you kind of like, how can I put it? Local family corporate. I can't really put an edge on where you're at the minute, but I just feel like you've got very good ethics, very forward. What I've seen with your team, the amount of money that you spent in your team, stuff like that is just, it's kind of made me realise that I need to do the same, really. But you still got the ethics of where we all come from, really.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly say that the Trade Mastermind is a maturing business. It's a business that's evolving from being that small startup, run from Joe's apartment type thing that it had come from, to now being much more of a structured company with mid-level management. We've got ambition to grow it further, introduce more product lines and services to what it is that we currently do. So, and typically that's...
Can I just stop you a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
We just need to curb that a little bit.
Sorry, we need to rein it back, don't we?
Let's roll it back, and we'll get into that, because ultimately you've got some really interesting stuff, and I want to ask you that a bit later on. I'm trying to get, that was probably my fault, by the way, try to get some insight about Chris and what Chris was, and a young lad growing up and how he did, and then we'll go on to that, if you don't mind. And ultimately,
absolutely.
Basically, so you've told me about the university. Mm-hmm. Now, just your first job, I'm guessing you got involved, like what you said, and it wasn't really something that you wanted to do, because you always wanted to own your business. Now, I do believe that you have got some properties, haven't you? I don't want to get into that because it might be personal, but ultimately, it's entirely up to you if you want to share that.
I'm interested in an investment portfolio of some sorts. Yeah, so it is diverse. So it's not just property, but there's a handful of different things.
Yeah, well, that's another podcast, isn't it, Chris? We'll do that another time.
Yeah.
So I think the big question I want to ask is, how do you get yin and yang together? How did yin and yang happen? How did Joe and Chris happen? How did you start working at Impra? How did, if you want to rewind to straight at the beginning when you met, did you meet at school? I mean, I don't think many people out there, because I don't think you get enough involvement or show of fame, should I say, as much as Joe anyway. How did you meet Joe? How did you start your journey with Joe? So
going all the way back to probably my first job, to be fair, after graduating university, early 20s, needed something to do. The industry that I'd worked in was not there, or I'd studied in was not there. Needed to make some money, and as I said, was interested in property. So my friend, one of my best friends, actually, his best man at his wedding, godfather to his children now, had a job at an estate agency, and he managed to get me a job there as well. And the pay, I remember, was £10,000 per annum, PAYE. So I was paid £10,000, post graduation. Yeah, probably overpaid at the time.
No, I'm joking.
But it was a different time back then. But hilarious to think that a graduate could possibly be paid £10,000. Obviously, I wanted to make more money, but I knew that I wanted to get into property. So and something that I picked up from my dad is I would never work for the paycheck. I'd work for the education. So I didn't care how much I was paid at the time.
Really good tip that.
Yeah.
That's really good. You know what, that's really good that you've just said that, because I think a lot of people work for the money and don't realise the education, and then it will come. Because I think, especially with the social media, what's about today and how it works, people think, you know, get your mindset, do this, but you still got to put the graft in. I don't believe anyone makes it without the graft.
The graft is a necessary part of it, but equally making sure that you're heading in the right direction is as important, I would say. It's all well and good working exceptionally hard. Sometimes you need to lift your head up and realize what it is that you're working hard on. That's for me a big thing that I've always been quite clear in my mind in terms of what it is that I'm going to put my effort to. But I think that a lot of people unfortunately just fall into what it is that they do and then don't.
I've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, hard graft is absolutely necessary. The grind is, you know, it comes with running a business and trying to build something for yourself, whatever that might be. It comes in employment. But so the graft is there, the grind is there, but make sure that you are focused on the right thing and not just being busy for being busy's sake, because that happens often. I see it all of the time.
Your teachers try to get out of that. So you're in the estate agents now. Not by any chance did Joe come walking in his suit, did he?
He did. So Joe has a famous story where you know, he incorporated his company. He was, you know, we're similar ages. So I was a youngster in my early 20s, and obviously so was Joe. I'm actually slightly older than Joe. My birthday's in July and his is in September. So I'm about to be 35, and so will he in September. But in our early 20s, I was sat in said estate agency, and as I said, Joe's got the famous story where he bought the posh umbrella and the pinstripe suit, and marched straight in. No, it hasn't. Yeah, I think since that day, he, you know, he's never not been in a suit. That's not strictly true, actually, because he was working, you know, tirelessly on Impra, as it was back in the day, as a home maintenance property. But funnily enough, actually, before he walked in, he contacted and called my manager at the time. His name was Matt, and somebody that, again, to this day, a really good friend and a friend of Joe's as well, actually. But contacted Matt, phoned him up randomly, and asked Matt over the phone, who does your gas safety certificates? And Matt responded in a cheekily way, saying, it doesn't matter, you'll never be able to beat that price. Joe said, try me. And I think after that phone call, Joe committed to do gas safety certificates for, you know, the landlord portfolio that we had of about £20 a pop, beating the last person that we were paying by about a tenner. So he managed to get himself a meeting with the head of the maintenance department in that company. So fast forward a few days later, Joe walked through. I was sat at the office. It's the first time I'd ever seen Joe in you know, dressed up to the nines with his posh umbrella, in kind of beeline straight through with his pre-organized meeting. I didn't know what was going on. I was a nobody. I was a, you know, low-level member of staff. I just happened to see him, and he walked straight through to the maintenance department that was around the back, so I didn't get to see what was going on. And everyone was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Like, this youngster, clearly a very successful business person, is the projection that he gave off. Yeah, the image that he gave off. And obviously being similar ages, I was like,
impressions and all that sort
yeah, and me wanting to be a business person, I was like, this guy's got it down. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he managed to secure himself the contract with that company. And so, you know,
well, at £20, I guess.
Yeah.